Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And away we go. And away we go. And away we go. Okay.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Good morning and happy Sunday to all of you pagans and lucky devils. Get any humidity up at your place? You ever live inside a soggy diaper? It's so soggy that once in a while a drop will form and fall out. That's the weather we're having this morning. Hi, William. How are you? I think I'm just going to go ahead and show you the equivalent of a premium episode this morning. But in the meantime, I'd like to take this opportunity to rant and rave for once about what's going on. I'll wait till a few people show up. I'm usually too late. Welcome to a special Sunday school episode. Pardon me. Oh. Excuse me. I just hope you're all enjoying the 21st century as much as I am. I can't believe my luck. Hi, Baby Bull. Once again, to update premium subscribers, pay your August bill, pay your September bill. Whenever you pay in August, September, pay those, if you can. And then I will manually cancel your auto renewal. So you don't get charged, but I'll extend your subscriptions until after the website. It won't go dark. It'll just go back to a free version that, it's just a landing page. It says hello. It'll be a page with links on it. So please do that. And then I will continue to do what I can. We will catch as can, but then I'll segue over to doing premium episodes on YouTube and maybe only charge like $5 a month, but not promise you a premium episode every week. And then you won't see ads, and I can stream 4 or 5 days a week, you lucky devils. And anything that is too ticklish for the tubes, I'll just put them on my Twitter and Facebook, because I don't care if those get shut down. I could not care less. Might as well use them. I can live stream to Twitter. I just can't charge until if I get my Twitter build up, I can start charging on Twitter, but I don't know if we want to go through all that again. A lot of people will not give Musk their money. Whatever. Not only is his kid trans, all 3 of Megan Fox's boys are trans now. Is this correct? Or is this one of those crazy internet theories that Facebook keeps making money off of and then blaming me for? Go ahead, Facebook. Blame me for anything you want to blame me for. When I went to Stanford, I showed you the videos of the statues. I drove right past Facebook headquarters. I flipped off Mark Zuckerberg for everybody, but I couldn't get that on video and drive at the same time. We never went past there again because I just went to Stanford by myself. All three of Megan Fox's sons are trans. Jordan Love agrees to $220 million over 4 years with the Pukers. Well, big whoop. Kamala Harris made $200 million this week, and she didn't do shit. Yeah. Yeah, the most expensive president ever will be the most democratic. The most expensive president ever will save democracy. Have no fear about that. What we've been doing wrong all these years is we expect presidents, congressmen, senators to be public servants. What we didn't understand is if you want democracy, you have to pay extra for that. I'm rooting. I'm purple right down to my underwear. I can't wait. We had 4 years of Trump, and that was fun. This just seems like a tired reboot. Have you seen the Connors? What we need now is some fresh insanity in the White House. I just can't believe it was Hillary. But Hillary's kind of old hat, and Hillary's kind of past her prime. Don't forget that. Although she's younger, she's younger than Trump. Attention, ye old baby boomers, you're done. Here comes Gen X. My parents were World War II people, so I am technically a baby boomer, but I'm the cusp. I am the cusp. I am the golden child. I bridge the gap between the baby boom and Generation X. Obama was far more baby boomer than Gen X. She believes in comic books. Comic books are her religion. I'm not joking. It's going to be more fun than a barrel of monkeys. If you think, because I'm the first person to admit, I don't think Trump did that bad of a job. You need somebody to shake things up like he did, but that's going to be nothing compared to the three-ring circus we're going to have for the next 8 to 20 years. Because if you think Trump tried to make himself dictator, she will be dictator by the end of the year. She'll be president by the end of the month. She'll be president by the end of this week. He will resign and she will be president. And she will take steps to safeguard the security of the election. If Biden can't campaign for president, how can he stop a Trump coup that they're predicting and that they're staging with, all the Proud Boy FBI informants are out of prison, right? I'm pretty sure they're all out. Terrio might not be out. Well, he's on the roster that he's supposed to be in prison. Yeah, you know this, right? Dick Clark was killed by routine prostate surgery. Dr. Joe Wallach, he knows a lot. He knows a lot. He's right about a lot of things. We've learned some new things since he was right about some things, but it doesn't mean that he was wrong, that the medical establishment is a fraud. Oh, did you notice the price of oil came down $3 or $4 the last week or so? So Hezbollah attacked Israel at an elementary school. Don't worry. Don't worry. You know Bill Gates is heavily invested in oil. You understand this, right? Three members of Grammy-nominated Nellon's gospel group among 7 killed in plane crash that sparked a wildfire. That reminds me, the thing about the California wildfires is this is part of a policy to just let them burn to let nature take its course. And, hi, Lard. You know that, right? Well, I'm about to tell you about some horrifying programs that you're seeing come to fruition right before your pretty little eyes. Yeah, drag me to the cemetery behind this thing. When my time comes, drag me to the cemetery behind this thing. Telekinesis, telekinephews. That's an oldie but a goodie. Let's get high and deny Christ. So up until now, I've told you that what I've been showing you are things I recognize from things I knew before, but I wasn't going to tell you things I knew from before because, number one, if I can't prove them, they're not worth mentioning. But I've just been telling you that I recognize this pattern, I've seen this before, or whatever, or, this rang a bell. I'm still not going to show you much of anything. I am going to tell you things I'm not going to show you. And I'm going to start right now. Can you hear that? According to the meter, you can't hear that. But when it has to block out a sound, sometimes my voice doesn't come through quite as mellifluously. Well, first let me point something out. Let me tell you that. How do I introduce this? I was heavily recruited for certain specific projects as a child prodigy in math. So my parents and I mutually decided we had no interest in me leaving home at 12 to go to the University of Illinois. And, and my father didn't feel like leaving the job he had to move to Urbana to we'll get you a job at Kraft or someplace. And, my dad's like, well, he's only going to be there for 2 years and then he's going to go to MIT. What's the point of that? I didn't want to go. And there was something a little creepy about their insistence. Well, the Korean kid got the job. What was his name? Park Soo-young or something? They wanted us for NASA, but they didn't send him to college. I don't remember his name. Korean kid. And he worked for NASA till he was like 28 years old. He went to NASA when he was like 14, and he worked for them till he was 28 when they got their supercomputer. And he was a computer. He was a human calculator. He could do these complex systems and partial differential equations all day, every day. That's what they wanted me for. When the day they were through with him, the day they switched on their supercomputer, he was fired. He was laid off. Not fired for cause. We don't need you anymore. Literally. And out the door he went. Literally. He didn't even have a high school diploma. So when I got to the University of Illinois right after my 16th birthday, because legally I could live on my own, they wanted me to live with this professor and his family. And my parents weren't real cool with that anyway, and I'm not going to make too big a deal out of it. We all agreed I really didn't want to do this. But I lived in this tiny little... If we'd had internet, it wouldn't have been a problem. If we had internet, when I was a kid, you'd all be speaking Tomese right now. Be that as it may or may not be. When I got there right after my 16th birthday, the thing about math prodigies is we're burnt out by 20. Our brains are starting to freeze up. I'm leading up to this. Hooray for me. It's not about talent. Look at Walter Payton and his hill. Look at Larry Bird running laps after league games in away stadiums. It's not about how much talent you get dealt. It's what you do with it. And as you can see. So when I got there, they let me dip my toes in a lot of waters. and see what I thought I might still be good at. But with math, Wolfram got his PhD. I was supposed to be the next Stephen Wolfram. Wolfram got his PhD at 20. And I was supposed to work on computable numbers. I was supposed to work on computation, which I just didn't really, to this day, right? Way to go, Steve. I mean that sincerely. Somebody, it was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it and take all the credit for it. No, I use it. It's great. I have used it. I don't have much use for it anymore. But I dipped a toe in computable numbers. Another, NASA was interested in, they were still heavily interested in discretizing data and performing calculations on supersonic wings at supersonic speed. How to discretize that data and how to actually let a computer model the wing. And I had no interest in that either. They weren't the hot and heavy foaming at the mouth recruiting me by the time I was 16. I was just another plow horse by that time. So, how can I put this? You know what the University of Illinois is famous for. They have the HAL computer in Space 2001: A Space Odyssey was built at University of Illinois Urbana, the supercomputer. Let me explain a little bit about the history of computer research in America. Harvard and MIT worked on the user. People who would use a computer to do their jobs, but not be computer engineers and programmers. They worked on the user. University of Illinois worked on machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Harvard and MIT worked hand in glove with IBM. So you're talking a lot of hardware, processor hardware, but U of I was also doing work on processors. U of I was ahead. They were working on processors. U of I was working on multiprocessors. Networked processors, supercomputers, parallel processing. University of Illinois at that time working on parallel processing, and they knew I had an interest in computers, and I already knew a lot about computers. I was working at a computer company while I was going to school. I was just taking classes. I wasn't going to school full time. I was just showing up for class. And they were letting me, it's all about grad school. So they were giving me an opportunity to try to pick career paths, research paths, so that when I left there, I would go, if I went to MIT or wherever, or if I stayed there for grad school. They were just letting me try out. It was funny. I was still a talented recruit, but I was no longer being shoved into programs that turned out to be horrifying. And also, so like at MIT, this is where they're developing the computer display, the screen can monitor to interact with the human instead of a teletype. The mouse pointer, or what they were using, was a light pen. MIT worked on the hardware. Harvard worked on how the user would use a computer. University of Illinois was focusing on multiple processors, parallel processing, supercomputers, and focusing more on the operating system of the, and the East Coast worked with IBM. The Illinois research was done in Chicago and Urbana in conjunction with Bell Labs. Bell Labs had a secret laboratory that you know nothing about, that I saw in the 80s near Chicago. There were other research programs related and unrelated, going on. University of Illinois has been doing research that you know nothing about. You know nothing about. At the time, I didn't realize how secret all this was supposed to be. I think they slightly underestimated how smart I was, because I don't think they realized what I was able to understand from what they were showing me and seeing if I wanted to work. They weren't saying we're going to build well, they were talking. They showed me Plato. Kamala Harris. They showed me Plato. They showed me how it worked. They were trying to find something I'd be interested in. Well, I got interested in set theory and number theory, and there was this professor there who, a visiting professor from Germany, Peter Green, which sounds like a Jewish name, right? He's teaching this advanced course. He's teaching a 400, 500 level seminar, select students. So I tried to sign up for the class. I went to talk to him. He looked me in the face and he said, I don't care to have any Jewish students in my class. And I went and I said, listen, I don't care if he likes me. I want to take the class. But isn't this, and they said, well, he's a visiting professor, and that's different. It's up to him. He wants you in. It's not a core curriculum class, so it's not the same thing. And I thought, well, that's a Jewish name. But over the years, looking back on it, I've realized he was from Germany. And he would have been a young child when the war was going on, and after the war was over. I wonder if he was a crypto Jew, and he couldn't afford to be associated with any Jews. He had to pretend to be anti-Semitic just to survive in his career and maybe keep his house from getting burned down. Who knows? Or maybe those are the lessons he learned as a child. My mother's family, not my mother, but like they were paranoid. Don't tell people we're Jews. They were crypto Jews, and they knew who everybody else. And they were kind of a mob of crypto Jews who moved to this little town in the 19th century and kind of ran things from the background, but didn't want anybody to know they were Jewish. But they could all out each other for being Jewish. It was kind of like that. Looking back on it, I kind of recognized what was going on. And looking back on it, I realized what some of the things are that they were working on, not only at the University of Illinois, but at a couple of other places. They said there's no guarantee there will be a future in this. There's no career in this. But there might be down the road, and mathematicians tend to burn out early. But something else they let me take a look at was their human genome research, needing the statisticians and the mathematics, number theory, set theory. Because human beings, here's the thing, and I try to explain this, and I'm going to explain this to you. You need to get, if you have a set of checkers in the house, find them. If you don't have some of these in the house, find some. You need some coins all the same size. It does not matter. Pennies, nickels, silver dollars, does not matter. Whatever is big enough for you to see, just see the shape of it. If you can see that there are 2 coins here, they're big enough, okay? And you need to get yourself a very cheap string of beads. Or if you have a nice string of pearls that are all the same size, and there's no pendant or anything, if you just have a very simple, very elegant string of pearls, send me your email address and alarm code. Or your mailing address and alarm code. Or just some cheap, don't get rosary beads because they have little markers. Well, you can, but just take the crucifix off of it. A string like Lisa Simpson pearls, Marge Simpson pearls, beads, like a bracelet or something, but one that you can unhook and hook back together again into a loop. Do those, and I'll give you some lessons in mathematics. Hi, Walter. But in the meantime, let me explain something to you. In math, there are transcendental numbers like pi, like e, but in real life, there are no transcendental numbers. There's no such thing as 6.281 blah, 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 blah shillings. There is no such thing. And I will demonstrate this for you visually soon. But in real life, there are transcendental numbers. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are no transcendental people. There are some incomplete people. There are some people who are a few bricks shy of a full load. There are a few people who are a few Legos shy of a full Millennium Falcon. However, they are not transcendental. People are data points. One particular square inch of an airplane wing is a data point. Points are different from numbers. It appears that points are the foundations of numbers. Points are used to describe numbers and their relationships all the time, but points are different from numbers. Points have no transcendental, there are no transcendental points. This means nothing to you until you go get yourself a string of beads that can be, you can, open and close the loop, and at least 6, and maybe a box of checkers would be perfect. But pennies would be great too, or buttons if they're all exactly the same size. They must be, if you're a seamstress or a seamster at Toulouse, and you have a sack of buttons that are all the same size, you could try using those. Pogs would work, but they're a little big. Bottle caps, they all have to be exactly the same size. Don't get the bottle caps like off of a Coke bottle. Get the ones that are round, okay? Get the round ones, not the ones that are like corrugated. Those won't work. Nuts won't work, but washers would. A sack of washers all exactly the same size would work. But coins are solid in the middle, so they're more like points. Okay, this is a point. This is a point. Viewed from a certain scale, this is a point. This is a point. However, and we'll learn this. 1 point equals 1 point. So this is not. They all have to be the same size. Make sure they're the same coin. Don't just get approximately the same size. You're not going to see what I want you to see. A lecture on Cantor and Terence Howard's 1 times 1 equals 2. Well, we'll see about that. Maybe for April Fool's Day. For now, what you need to understand is genes, people, those statistics that Keyes was rattling off at you. They got suicide broken down by suicide by poison, suicide by falling, suicide by shooting, different kinds of poison. Got it all broken down that way. People are data points. There are no fractions, and there are no transcendental people. Remember this. There are no transcendental people. Pythagoras, this is all comic book stuff. Mathematics is all comic book stuff. Nature doesn't give a rat's ass about your mathematics. Nature is comprised of points. So, we'll talk about that soon. But so that was the kind of far-fetched research. Could be cancer research, could be anything. We just don't know yet. So that was related to the discretization of data. So that's how I got interested. Well, I'd lost all interest in solving any more engineering problems and just got hooked on the grooviness of number theory and set theory. For what it's worth, I dabbled in general relativity. I'm going to show you something that tickles me about general relativity. I've already showed you that quantum mechanics has zero explanation for the redshift, right? Did I tell you about the Higgs boson fiasco? Remind me to tell you about the Higgs boson fiasco, about which they have been dead silent. Oh, the experiment was quite successful. A quite successful fiasco. My point is, I got a glimpse hanging around campus from what I'd seen in the labs that I could, you want to try this? And what else was going on campus that they didn't think needed to be, that sometimes they were pretty loud about. Let me tell you what some of the things they were working on. And over the years, looking back on it, I've realized something. And one thing I realized is there was this old guy, war hero and everything. There was this old guy, a dry drunk. He was a recovering alcoholic and very high energy old boy. And he was like my minder to a certain extent. But now looking back on it, because a lot of this stuff was technically top secret. A lot of this stuff was bet your fucking ass top secret. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think they realized how much I was able to actually learn about what they were showing me in the brief period of time I got to dabble with it. They would give me a problem to take home. Play with this. See if you enjoy solving these kinds of problems. Here's the thing. Looking back on it, what I've learned, none of those people were supposed to be talking to each other about their own research. They were supposed to not, but there was something secret about it, about them. They were getting together and talking about their research. And this guy was their minder. They would get together and talk about what they were doing, but they weren't supposed to. This guy was their minder, and I think he was a spook who was listening to their and just reporting on what kinds of conversations they were having. Not necessarily to even to arrest them, but the way and you see this today. Up until social media and social sentinel software that's listening to me now, this is very recent. There's been this legend that the United States listens to every phone call. No, they didn't have the manpower for that. But they developed the computer power to transcribe phone calls and then search through them. That's been in the last, since the internet, really, since the last 10, 15 years. They've made it real. Up until then, they relied 100%. We relied 100% on compartmentalization of knowledge. I realize that those people, those scientists working on all those horrifying projects, many of them, at University of Illinois, were not supposed to be talking to each other. But everybody understands the scientific value of getting people to talk together, the fusion of ideas. This was a big argument that Oppenheimer had with Groves and the FBI at Los Alamos is, I understand your desire to compartmentalize this knowledge, but you got to understand if you want scientific progress and you want it that fast, these people have to get together and mix up ideas. This was something they fought about all the time. Well, looking back on it, this guy was not just there to make sure I didn't learn too much, not just that I would go run to the Russians and blab, but, put my life in jeopardy. I didn't, if you think about looking back on what they were showing me, there was a guy I worked for one summer. Looking back on it. Well, this old boy he was kind of my minder. He was introducing me to everybody, but he was one of the few who officially was supposed to know everybody. Now, not even officially. He only knew them socially, and that's going to be very important in either today's premium episode or coming up real soon. Remember we came across that name Somer, and I said maybe they're not closely related. Maybe they don't know each other, but I knew a Somer going back to those days, but he worked up by Chicago. And it turns out I was not introduced to him as somebody who worked at the No Such Agency. I was introduced to him as somebody who worked at Bell Labs. So none of this is evidence of anything. I'm just explaining why bells go off every time I look into Son of Sam or JFK. I'm like, well, holy shit. Once I start to, and then I go to work for companies, and I go to work as a private investigator, and I go to work as this, and I go to work as that, and I start to realize the underworld is not Disneyland that you have to travel thousands of miles to get to. The underworld is in your neighborhood. All you got to do is peek in your neighbor's windows. And do not do that. You don't want to see. You do not want to see what your neighbors are doing. There's somebody at your bank playing with your money. There is somebody at your work who has an unhealthy interest in your children. There's somebody at your school who has an unhealthy interest at your children. It's everywhere. And it's a small world. There's no compartmentalization of knowledge in the underworld. Well, and this guy was known as a saint, a war hero. Couldn't sit still. He was involved in one civic activity after another. I'm not tearing him down in the slightest, but I came across his name looking into the attempted shooting at Donald Trump. Wouldn't it be funny if he got hit by accident, like Carl Denaro? It kind of looks like Carl got hit by accident. They were just shooting at him, and a bullet bounced off the window frame or something and hit him in the back of the head. Yeah, there's a big dark town. There's a world going on underground. That's right. Always has been. It's always been right there. It's always been right there. Gnosticism was not exterminated by Holy Mother Church. It just went underground. The Jacobites were not defeated. They went underground. They became the Molly Maguires. They became whatever. They became the Provisional IRA. They were not exterminated. They just went underground a little bit. Communism has not been exterminated. It just went underground. That brings me back to Kamala Harris and her new generation. The medical school. You don't normally think of medical schools doing top secret research. Well, this research was not top secret, but there was top secret research I was recruited for, that I suddenly realized was the same project. A project is a research project. An operation is you're going out and doing something. The project was to create a generation, not a race, but to create a generation of eunuchs to study. To create a population of eunuchs of many races and other backgrounds. To create eunuchs. Because down through history, right, morally, ethically, legally, all men are created equal. However, everybody knows all men are not literally created equal. We want our ethical system, our justice system, our government to treat everyone equal. We all have equal rights so far. Well, in real life, right? There's theory and there's real life. What's the difference between theory and real life? In theory, there is no difference between theory and real life. But in real life, there's a big difference between theory and real life. Newton's law of gravity is not a law that the universe obeys. It is an observation of the shape of the orbits of the planets. It is not a why, it is a what. He never said it was why, but he implied it was, and he was shocked. He went digging through all the old books he could find. They knew that Aristarchus of Samos in the 4th century AD had constructed a model of the universe with the sun at the center and the Earth one of the planets orbiting. But they couldn't find a copy of the actual book. But it was referred to. Someone had done this. But as far as deducing the actual equations for the planets, that fit all of them, comets and everything, Newton, it kind of shook Newton up. He was afraid he was wrong, and he'd be proven wrong, which would have killed him. He was Sheldon Cooper. But he was also deeply, deeply religious. He was Puritan. And it's funny how puritanical the woke are, even though they claim they're not Christians. But I'm telling you that, oh yeah, we're the real Christians. They're Gnostic Christians. whether they know it or not. They are Gnostics, whether they know it or not. The comic book cult, the DC Marvel Universe, is Gnostic. You understand that, right? But they're looking at themselves going, we made a crystal ball, or they were building crystal balls. Well, television is a crystal ball. Look what we did. We harnessed electromagnetism. We sent voices through the air. As soon as they could send the voice through the air, they realized this is no different from ESP. This is no different from ghosts. And then Farnsworth built a crystal ball, and they said, well, holy shit, all that other stuff might be true too. It's a reasonable hypothesis that the ancients did have more advanced scientific knowledge. Newton believed it to the core of his bones. And then you get Swedenborg, who comes along and tells you that angels and ancient... Swedenborg very specifically creates the theory of the ancient astronaut. And more of these scientists, they hear about it, and then they see television, and they think, well, holy shit. Then they see the atomic bomb, they think, holy shit. So when genetics comes along, and a lot of your Nazis studied eugenics, and then they found out more specifics about genetics, they were very interested in race purity, partly as an experiment. But they were also, they're like, well, holy shit, if crystal balls are real, if flying into outer space is real, what else was real? Were unicorns real? Were giants real? Were elves and pygmies real? And they knew this did occur naturally in the human population from time to time, either hermaphrodites or androgynous people. A hermaphrodite is, one half of the body tends to be male, one half is female. Then there's the androgyne, who's stuck between genders, transgendered people. And the medical term, gender is a role you play in society. I am playing the role of a man. But he's wearing women's clothes. No, see, once men, have you noticed old people tend to look, you can't really tell the gender? That's because gender is a role you play. In America, men do not hold hands socially, and friends don't hold hands. In Arabia, male friends hold hands, married couples don't hold hands. That's gender. That's something that just whatever, that's culture, which is totally, we can just make up any cultural rules we want. Sex is biology. Well, you can argue about that all you want. But people who were androgynous tended to have special talents, according to legends and myths and histories. But they don't grow on trees. They're rare. So in the ancient world, right up until a couple hundred years ago, the only way to create an androgyny was castration, a eunuch. And down through history, eunuchs have been intellectually and politically powerful and artistically powerful. So modern science is like, can we create androgynies genetic engineering? Or is there just a simpler workaround? Before we even try to do that, why don't we just use hormone therapy? What I see happening now is they were dabbling in hormone therapy. But what they call puberty blockers, we need laboratory rats. Well, that's unethical. Here's what we do. There are lots of boys out there with Peter Pan syndrome, and maybe girls. We're interested in the boys with Peter Pan syndrome. We'll call that a disease, and we use hormone therapy as a treatment. We will actually stop puberty from happening. And we're seeing that first we saw some. I noticed about 30 years ago. I noticed in the 90s you started seeing, and also a propaganda campaign to normalize it. I'm not saying there's anything unnatural about somebody being born the way they're born, the way God made them. That's natural. What I'm saying is these are laboratory-created freaks. And what they do is they exploit children suffering from Peter Pan syndrome. I don't want to grow up. I don't want to go through puberty. Or puberty, as we say, south of 70. So now they have a cure for that. But the purpose behind it, maybe not they find doctors who are willing to do this. But I know for a fact this was a research project going back to the early 1980s, and it must have started in the 70s, looking at doing it genetically and looking at doing it. Obviously, they were looking at doing it because I think what they did, they realized you don't need to, there's nothing genetic about it. It's something that happens during development. between fetal development and infancy lasts up until about the age of 7. And all of my Bible nuts out there, help me out here. I lost track of it the other day. I'll find it. There's something it's not in the Gospels, is it in Hebrews? It's about children reaching their 7th birthday in some spiritual thing. And that's why John Bonet had to die before his 7th birthday. It's in there. It's related to Jesus saying, suffer the children to come unto me. But then from 7 to 12, you're in your apprenticeship. You're learning how to be a wife and mother. You're learning how to be a carpenter. You're learning whatever. Then at 12, you hit adulthood because you're ready to reproduce and you need to be ready to provide for your family. You hit adulthood 13, 14. You were an adult. Married, had a family on the way, and you are an adult with a job. The ancient world was young. Now, girls can block the onset of puberty by keeping their body fat down to a certain level. They don't need hormones. Their own hormones will stop menstruation more or less if they keep their body fat low enough. This is what makes anorexia nervosa so compulsive. She doesn't want to hit puberty, and she instinctively figures out, or she reads in a magazine, that if your body fat is too low, you can't menstruate. It's not the only reason for it, but it's the major reason for it. And the hormones will adjust. If you're not ready to have a baby, then if you're not fat enough to have a baby, then you shouldn't even be having a baby right now. But you can do it with hormones. There doesn't seem to be any real value to that. Politically, economically, there's no value. But here's the thing. There's another layer of research going on here about turning the human race into a termite colony. It's about politics. It's about politics of the superstate. How do we, and at what point can a population suddenly become more like a termite colony? Well, termite colonies and ant colonies, every single member is neuter. So what they're creating, what you're seeing the next generation. You're seeing Nexus 7 hit the streets now. And it's now becoming, the preliminary research is done. They think they have the protocol, a standard protocol. So now you're seeing Nexus 6 hit the TV, and now you're seeing Nexus 7 at the clinics right now. This is your standard treatment. So they're not only creating, some of them are into it, they're creating unicorns, they're creating eunuchs, they're hoping to create these geniuses, but they're also doing an experiment now on a sexually neuter society. Because is that required? Will that work? If you have a large population of sexually neuter humans, can you get them? Because when people get old, like retirement homes, there's a lot of sex that goes on in the retirement homes, but there's not much violence. That sexually, as you get older, you hit menopause, and menopause, you become sexually more neuter. Well, what if we do this before they hit puberty? Can we create a race, and let's leave race out of it. For political reasons, we're not going to be able to do that. There are some people involved in this research who have these racialist ideas. Don't kid yourselves. But let's create an entire generation of neuter people. Maybe we'll get them to live together in colonies, and this is one of the big experiments. Well, this was research that was being carried out at the University of Illinois in the 1980s. And I'm seeing it hit the streets. I think it's marvelous, but I have no... I have no moral conscience. So I think it's hilarious. But you're seeing it. And they are bringing their comic book universe to life. I mean, they're taking this idea of, I can create a comic book universe, can I make it real? They are making it real. There's another experiment about, forget artificial intelligence, connecting every human brain on the planet to one centralized network and see what happens. And can we control that? You saw, they've just publicized, there's a computer now that has blobs of human brain tissue connected through computer circuits. And in order to train the blobs of human brain tissue to do this kind of processing they want to do, they use dopamine and electric shocks. You saw that, right? That's not a conspiracy theory. This is a real company. This is a real company who has patented this technology, and they have it just about ready for sale to laboratories and engineering firms and things like this. So we know they can control your brain with dopamine and electric shocks if they wanted to. You're either a Tom Waits fan or you're not a Tom Waits fan. Let me throw you a passive-aggressive curveball. One word, Morrissey. There we go. Now we got a fight on our hands. What's the one word in the English language that'll start a riot quicker than any other? Not the N word, the M word, Morrissey. I've never seen... People can argue about Justin Bieber, they can argue about Diddy, they can argue about Elvis, they can argue about the Beatles. I've never seen people argue like they argue over Morrissey. And I'm one of them. We argue over Morrissey the way people argue over Pavarotti. Oh, who does University of Illinois have a mini CERN collider? They have a super CERN collider. There are things I cannot talk about, probably even to this day. Not that I know anything that would be worth kidnapping me over. What I'm saying is, the University of Illinois has been doing research that you know nothing about. And I don't even want to know what they're working on now. Needless to say, I had extensive contact with the supercomputer people. Unix was developed at U of I by Bell Labs. The browser was developed at the University of Illinois by students there in the computer science department with help from their professors. See, if you're a professor and you file a patent, the university owns all the royalties, unless you have a certain... You got to negotiate that contract before you sign it, and they won't hire you. So they secretly taught those two kids how to build Mosaic, and then they got shares in the company that they didn't have to... Well, we don't have the patent on it. The kids have the patent on it. That's like Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't invent shit. You understand that, right? These students are fronts for professors who have these slave-like contracts with the universities. You know that, right? I saw that with my own eye. I was told that by every professor I met. For Christ's sake, don't become a professor. If you have any brains, stay out of the academy. That's why I became an English professor, because they don't own the copyright on what I write. We have a different contract than the scientists do. They're not providing me with any laboratory research facilities, so they don't get a piece of my royalties. That's a long time, but that's a long time standard. Nobody said, for Christ's sake, we're creating horrible monsters here, because the left hand did not know what the right hand was doing. The people who were working on the genome project had no idea what their masters were going to use it for. And there are a couple of others that are even more horrifying that I can tell you the Chinese are paying the Koreans to do. I don't want to know about it. But it won't be in the general public, not for a couple more generations probably. But this whole idea, there are doctors who are out there thinking they're helping kids, but they are being used as part... This is an experiment. This is an experiment in creating a neuter society, and it's an experiment in creating eunuchs and androgynes. And I'm all for it. I'm all for human experimentation, but that's just me. And as far as Trump being a three-ring circus to distract us from what's really going on, wait till Kamala is president. I'm telling you, you looked at the church she went to. You saw all this, and you saw what she champions, and you saw what she hates. One way for women, the way they looked at it back then in particular, she's just about my age. I'm between her and Obama, right? She's the baby sister. Obama's the big brother. I'm the ignored middle child who's constantly screaming for attention, one way or another. And she's the baby sister. who's so spoiled she never had a baby. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a woman not having a baby. You know what? Maybe she had endometriosis. Maybe she had to have sometimes girls have to have, or they're prescribed hysterectomies. Maybe she just chose not to have children. Whatever. But I'm telling you, in those days, one way for women to not go full-blown woman was to avoid having children. Whether that turned out to be medically true or not. But there would have been people who would have said, oh, no, you don't have to have babies if you don't want to, because they were interested to see what would happen. They wanted to study a woman who did not have children and see what the effect was. They study nature, and then they pervert nature. They think they're gods. Look at their crystal ball. You're watching me on a crystal ball now. They think they can just play with nature. Well, they can play with nature. They're the ones who blow shit up. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were just following the science. It wasn't their idea. It was a Nazi idea. We just had to get there before they did. We had to be more evil than they were. Otherwise, we would have lost the war. And they're right about that. There is no crime in a termite colony. There is no crime in an ant colony. There is no crime in a honeybee colony. They are not a society. We are a society. A pack of wolves is a society. We are social animals. They are not social animals. This is a very important distinction. An ant colony is a family. They're practically clones, and they are sexually neuter. Gender's got nothing to do with it. Some are workers, some are soldiers, some are this, some are that. They're sexually neuter, all of them. Can we build a human society like that? Why not? If they're going to live on the moon, they're going to live on Mars, they probably need to be more of an ant colony. Have you seen the movie Cowboys and Aliens? By far, the most realistic alien invasion movie I have ever seen. They're not here to take over the Earth. He's just a prospector who's mining gold out in the American West, and these settlers show up. And he's just trying to keep his operation. He has cloned himself to create minions to work for him. They are like a colony of ants or termites. They work for him mining the gold. And these cowboys stumble over what's going on. It's really cool. It's a good movie, and it's based on a comic book called Cowboys and Aliens. Harrison Ford plays an old ranch baron who built, had to build a town to all the people who work on his ranch, and he owns this town. And he's losing control of the town and his son and all this other stuff. And there's this alien. They come across this alien, and he's not taking over the Earth. He's just mining the gold. We're the natives. Daniel Craig. Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig. Yeah, there. Thanks, baby bull. Did Hoffman invent LSD? No, he did not. LSD, he was asked to let me tell you what a chemist is. You think a chemist is a guy in a laboratory inventing something. No, 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 no. That's a chemical engineer. There are very few of those. Chemists are the minions. Chemists are the slaves of the chemical engineer. They say, synthesize this molecule. I need 5 pounds of that. And they go off and do that. Hoffman was instructed to synthesize LSD for marketing research. They were going to test it and see if it could be sold as a treatment for PMS. I'm not kidding. Man, that's some kind of heavy juju. It's going to take some very powerful magic. It's going to forget mushrooms. We need the atomic bomb. We need the atomic bomb of drugs to tackle this problem, gentlemen. We fixed the potato chip problem with Pringles. Now we got to fix PMS. We need something with a real punch to it. That'll cure her PMS. Ladies, if you're suffering from them old first of the month blues, try LSD. My buddy's an anthropologist, an archaeologist. So we were watching the pilot episode of Gilligan's Island or something, and they're getting off the boat, and my buddy pipes up and says, the first thing we're going to build is a minstrel hut. He grew up with a bunch of sisters and a mom, you know. He was the oldest, so his mom was young. And the first thing we're going to build is a minstrel hut. These tribes women have to go and they live in the minstrel hut till it's over. Talk about putting a bunch of cats in a sack. Shoot. But what if you skipped puberty and adult womanhood and childbearing? Nothing happens to the man. Nothing. Nothing happens inside, nothing happens outside. If he looks like my grandfather, I might get attached to it. Other than that, or looks like my parents, I might get attached to it if you're lucky. But something happens to the woman. I don't know if you've ever known a woman before, during, and after pregnancy. You're talking about, forget Sybil. And God love them. But see, one thing they were already talking about. This guy, my minder, gave me did he give me the book? It wasn't the guy from the NSA. He gave me a book. It was published in the 60s. It was a little thin book, like this. It's just one of these little harmless little thin books. And it said, Mathematics for Liberal Arts Majors. Really, really blew my mind, really got me turned on to number theory. But looking back on it, I realized he was their minder. He was supposed to be making sure that they weren't talking to each other, but we were always showing up at things where they were all getting together talking about their work. And he was listening. I don't know. Who knows? But now, when I show you what I'm about to show you, suddenly it makes sense. And a lot of this stuff is making sense as I look back over it over the years. It's like, holy shit, the reason I had this feeling I kept running into the same thing over and over again is because I was running into the same thing over and over again. And that's because the so-called deep state, the so-called intelligence networks, they are not the entire underworld, but they have their tentacles in the underworld as far as they can get them, because that's 99% of their business. Anyway. When you watch Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I haven't seen the movie version. Is it good? When you watch the old BBC series, and I don't have time to read the books, you understand that most of the people they're dealing with are criminals. And there's a layer of bureaucratic buffer zone between them and the criminals. And they're hiring criminals to do jobs. They're recruiting criminals to do jobs. But the British start recruiting occultists. That's another type of underground. They're used to code names. They're used to keeping secrets. And I know this. There was no doubt. This was in the air, that a lot of these people belong to some crazy cult. And when I got to Hollywood and I ran into the Avatar cult, I realized that's what they believed in. And this is what this is exactly what Oppenheimer's talking about. He's not becoming a god. He is an avatar of Kali. That's what he thought he was. He thought he was an avatar of the god. Like the way they would describe Jesus as an avatar of God. And Trinitarians, eminence is pretty much what avatar means. It's a common idea. Who influenced who? And then, of course, women sync up. But what he was just, I understood, he got the idea. And the first thing we're going to do is build a minstrel hut. Before we look for food, first thing we're going to do is build a minstrel hut. He's the one that showed me the tapes of the bonobo chimpanzees that are just like humans. So, next time your lady's giving you a hard time and you think it might be by us, is it the 28th already? Give her a couple, just give her, put some window pane in her tea. Here, sweetie, I made you some tea. But apparently, it is an effective treatment for PMS. But they had already synthesized the molecule 20 years earlier. Hoffman was simply requested to make more of it, and on his way home, he starts tripping balls, but he's a trained scientist, and LSD's not, it's overpowering, but it's not overpowering. It doesn't put your conscious mind to sleep. It just puts on a hell of a show. Oh, what are you doing up? And then it just goes ahead and does what it's going to do. You know how your conscious mind and your subconscious mind are never seen at the same place at the same time? Drop LSD. They will, two dots will occupy the same place at the same time. Your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. You go back to being a very young child. You go back to being 3 years old, 2 years old. Between birth and 3-4 years old, not quite 5 years old, is what happens when you drop acid. The connections hasn't solidified yet. But it wears off. And suddenly you're standing at Kroger wearing your mom's pajamas. And said, it must have been that stuff I was making. And it must have been a tiny little amount. So we played with it some more. Well, let's get back to Sigmund Freud was a neurologist, and the first neurologist, the man who coined the word neuron, the man who noticed that the brain was a network of cells, not cells feeding off a network of blood vessels. The man who made that discovery was Emanuel Swedenborg. Literally. Freud was training as a neurologist. He was a neurologist. So Park Davis sent a whole bunch of all the neurologists in the world. They sent them a kilogram of cocaine. See what this is good for. Literally, this is how they used to do research. Freud used it to create the first cokehead. He cured an opium addict with pure pharmaceutical grade cocaine and wrote a paper about it. Cocaine is a cure for heroin addiction. And the cokehead was born. That was Sigmund Freud. Well, now, not all the powers that be. They have their factions, don't you see? The communists want to destroy the family because the family is a rival to the state. The Platonists, the true Platonists, yes, the Pilgrims were Platonists, but they got it from Christianity. Christianity got it from Plato. A neuter, sexless, therefore genderless society. But there's other people who want to create a real-life Disneyland with fairies and pixies, and I don't mean those as insults, but that's what they want. And giants and unicorns, and they can create that. There are competing research programs. But let me start the premium stream, and I may redo it. I've been talking till I'm blue in the face. I'm almost as white. On TV, I'm almost as white as Kamala. Kind of rearranges the furniture in your mind, which is healthy. Unless you've got a blind dog living up there. LSD strips away all the lies you've been telling yourself. So, depending on how big those lies are, the shock can be shocking, or it can be amusing. You will realize that we are lizard people. We're just hairy lizards. That's all we are. We are literally lizard people. We're not just monkey people. We're lizard people. We're fish. We're frog people. We're fish people. Have you noticed that they try to turn spiders into plush toys with limited success. But they can turn a fish into a cartoon character, Nemo, because we are fish. We are fish who walk on land and grew hair. We are reptiles who grew hair. We are monkeys who shave off our hair. Well, the civilized people do. Have you ever noticed that all the evil in the world has been done by clean-shaven people? Julius Caesar had all the hair removed from his body with pumice. It's the best way to do it. Because it also exfoliates. Hire 3 Egyptian slave girls to rub you, take sponges, natural sea sponges, and very, very finely ground pumice like talcum powder, but you got to use pumice, not talcum powder. Pumice will take off all the hair, or at least shave it off, and take off all the dead skin. It's expensive and time consuming, but if you're as vain as I am, you're pricing it online right now. He was hallucinating. He was riding his bicycle home and hallucinating all the way home, and was hallucinating when he got home, and he realized that he must have. It was a pharmaceutical company. He realized but this was different from any other chemical he'd accidentally ingested. And when he realized it was the LSD, and he realized how tiny of a dose it must have been, he went back and played with it some more. They do experiment on the cells. They do. Yeah. But LSD turned out to be overrated. And the effects were it's hard to create permanent change unless you're curing somebody's unclean spirit. Your subconscious mind is not buried deep. Your conscious mind is working overtime trying to keep the closet doors shut. Your subconscious mind is not buried deep. It's just that your conscious mind, depending on how painful the memory is, and when I say painful, I mean how much you blame yourself. Whatever shame and guilt you're carrying around, the size of that feeling is how hard your conscious mind is pushing down on it to try to hold it down. This leads to depression because your brain is spending all of its time trying to silence the subconscious mind. It's not buried deep. If it was buried deep, it wouldn't be causing you problems. It's just that from your point of view, it's a monster in the closet. And when you get a chance to realize it, it's just, then your conscious mind can bring it out and spank it and change its diaper and send it on its way. And it won't be running your life anymore. It's not really running your life so much as your conscious mind is actually suppressing it. That's why it tricks you into getting drunk so it can come out of the closet and play for a while. And LSD just takes all the doors off all the closets. LSD gets rid of the walls. The earth is flat and wide open for about 5 hours. That's one more thing. Once you turn it on, it's like a 2-year-old. It's not going to bed for 5 hours. You're along for the ride. Alcohol, tranquilizers mean nothing to LSD. Was Sid Barrett the guy who jumped out of the window, or he fell out the window? Well, methamphetamine can do the same thing. But LSD just seems to be the crack cocaine of psychedelics. Whereas mushrooms are a lot more gentle. Yeah, you need a spirit guide if you're going to drop acid. You need a babysitter. Hopefully a trained therapist. You can make tremendous progress, but you need somebody there to make it safe. too many people, a lot of these sudden suicides, LSD is undetectable in an autopsy. It cannot be detected. A lot of these sudden suicides could easily just, that this person, if they dropped LSD, would probably kill themselves, and you just slip them some LSD and they kill themselves. You cannot murder somebody with LSD, but you could push them over the edge chemically where they would have a high probability maybe of doing it. That's true. Murder? I don't know. Pink Floyd founder was nuts. Can you so now the Defense Department, they chip in money on a project like this. Can we increase intelligence to do these calculations? It's like, in the movie Dune, there's a drug that increases their intelligence so they can perform the calculations. This is research that was going on at the University of Illinois Medical School in conjunction with their other schools that they didn't necessarily know that's what they were contributing to. But I saw a lot of components and how they could fit together, probably more than they realized I saw. They didn't make a big deal just saying, please. Because it was explained to me, industrial espionage is in the air. Yeah, intelligence agencies keep their fingers on it. They keep their fingers on the pulse of industrial espionage, but industrial espionage was everywhere. Other than that, I don't think they realized how much they showed me. And looking back on it, it's like, holy shit. And then I just kept bumping into the same patterns. There's always this minder. There's always this touch of financial shenanigans because they're competing over grant money. If we don't take the grant money from the CIA, we'll have to shut the lab down and we'll all be out of work. You've seen Ghostbusters. You've seen Ghostbusters. Well, there's some overenthusiasm, but a lot of that's paid for. Let's just run the experiment and see what happens. Not that the doctor involved knows, that what they're giving out is part of it. Just the CIA just wants to see what happens. So you get a group of people like the Manson runaways, you get them all together in a family and you try it on them. Lots of different ways of running the experiment. With the Manson family, it was the Free Love Society. What if there's no marriage? What effect does that have on society? Here's a society where they had no marriage. This was Plato's society in the sense that the children were property of the community, raised by the community. Did that thrive and survive? Not very well, but a lot of those people, and I think Kamala Harris is, it's the new generation, absorbed that teaching. LSD cannot be detected at autopsy. There is no, it can be, but it's super expensive and they can't justify the expense. So let me get going. Let me go ahead and record today's premium episode. It's a little rough drafty, but you need to see this. And there, with the caveat, updates are coming out by the minute. So thank you, SpewTube. Thank you very much. Get signed up. Pay for August and September, and then I'll keep it. It'll go until at least until December. I will manually cancel your auto payments. How's that? So, ooh. I'm Professor Thomas Henry Horan, asking you to please stay plugged in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
He reads everything.
Okay.